Hi, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to another YouTube video. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about my top 5 favorite secondary or accessory variations to the squat, the bench, and the deadlift. So let's just go ahead and hop right into it. And apologies in advance, I'm filming this really quickly while my daughter's awake just because I don't want to miss any videos. Let me know if there's anything that you want me to film in future videos, but let's just hop right into the video with squats. So starting off with my top 5 favorite squat variation movements, this is just what my squat looks like without any variations. I squat with a low bar squat. This is my previous squat mechanics before my competition, and then this is what I'm working on now. This is what I'm trying to get my squat to look like more fluidly, where as you can see in the first clip, I have kind of like a 2-part motion on the descent because my legs are really long and I also get scared of loading my knees. So you'll see me working on more of an even hip knee transfer. I'm trying to cue my knees pushing forward more naturally and not pushing them back and then forward at the very last second. But anyways, moving on to my top 5 squat exercises. So my first squat exercise is going to be the pause squat. I'm showing you a video from this week of training. I'm currently working squats in flats just to see if it's a little bit better. I've noticed that my foot pressure is a little bit off just because the base isn't as solid, but I feel like I can get more quad engagement with flats than with the typical heel elevation for the squat shoes. But with or without flats, my favorite squat variation is definitely pause squats, just because it helps me get to where I can feel totally stable and secure at the bottom of the hole, and then you can work on the explosiveness out of the hole after you work on that most difficult portion of pausing at the bottom. But making sure you're getting an actual honest pause is really important to get the benefit of a pause squat. My second favorite squat variation is going to be high bar squat, and I like high bar squat because it changes the position of your torso. If you're squatting with a low bar, that means that the bar is lower down on your back, versus high bar, it's more up on your upper traps. And so it forces you to get into more of an upright position. You get a little bit more quad engagement, and usually it's a weaker variation for most, although I will say a lot of people do find themselves to stay stronger in the high bar stance. And I will also mention that as I'm talking about my favorite variations, for me, I'm not built for squat. I have really long legs. I'm also just really tall for powerlifting. I'm 5'9" and my legs are much longer in proportion to my torso. So these accessories might be helpful for you based on your build if you're more similar to me, or if you're working on some different weak points, because accessories, secondary movements, however you want to call it, the goal is to target weak points. That's the main primary goal of working on secondary movements. So my third top choice is going to be a 1.5 rep squat, and I'm doing them high bar here, but I will say that I like them high bar or low bar. Either way works, but the best thing about this movement is that you're working on the bottom portion of the movement. You're going down, a little bit up, back down again, and then all the way back up. So you're working on that most difficult sticking point twice with each rep. And then tempo squat is going to be my fourth favorite. This was actually a video from a few years ago. I haven't done tempo squats in a while just because I'm naturally not a very explosive squatter, but I will say that if you are an explosive squatter, tempo squats are probably going to be a really good variation for you. Or if you're just changing your squat positioning, tempo is really good to feel it out, feel what feels the most comfortable for you. And then my fifth favorite squat accessory movement is going to be safety bar squat. I will say that I don't think that it has the most carryover to squats just because it's a different bar, but it is a lot of core work and a lot of quad work. Those are weak points for me, especially the quads. You'll notice the theme throughout the video. But anyways, that's all for squats. Moving on to bench next. Before I get into my top 5 favorite bench variations, I'm just going to show you what my bench looks like now. This is my standard competition bench press with the pause. I grip with max comp grips. That means that my index finger is on the ring. And I also have a flatter back bench position now than I do in some of these previous clips as well. So my top favorite number 1 exercise for assistance with bench press is going to be Larson bench, because it takes the leg drive out of the equation. It was also really helpful when I was transitioning to that chest touch point from the previous stomach touch point that led me to have a lot of really icky sticking points. Number 2 favorite bench press variation is going to be close grip bench, or even just a medium grip bench. My standard close grip bench is 4 fingers inside of my comp grip bench, and then my medium grip bench, which I also work sometimes, is going to be 2 fingers in. Number 3 is going to be tempo bench. Again, this was my previous touch point where I had an extreme arch, and I touched on my stomach, so it's a little bit different than what my bench looks like now. Number 4 is going to be 1.25 rep bench, similar to the 1.5 rep squats, where you're working on that bottom portion of the movement, getting yourself to feel comfortable with that sticking point, the most challenging portion of the movement. And then number 5, floor bench. I really like floor bench, however, I don't think it's necessarily the most carryover, just because you're not getting as much of a range of motion. But you are able to work on more top end strength and getting comfortable with feeling the weight. And then obviously I was super pregnant in this clip. And last but certainly not least, we have deadlifts. So just showing you right now for comparison's sake, this is what my competition deadlift looks like. I'm a conventional puller. I deadlift with a belt. My stance is pretty narrow. These were some of my deadlifts from this week of training. All the variations that I'm choosing are based on being a conventional puller and also just being a natural deadlifter. So again, like I mentioned with squats are not a natural movement for me, and I'm working on quads with my weak point, whereas deadlifts, my weak point is off the ground. My glutes are really strong, but off the ground, that's where I struggle. So most of these variations are targeted on strengthening that off the ground or just strengthening the core and back stability. So my number 1 favorite variation for deadlifts, I was actually about 3 or 4 months pregnant in this clip, so I had to deadlift beltless. But beltlift deadlifts are great because they help you manage the weight that you're lifting, so you're not going to be lifting as much without a belt as you are with a belt, and then you're really forced to get a good brace without that external cue of having the belt there. Number 2 favorite variation is going to be pause deadlifts. I'm doing this beltless. This was about 3 months postpartum, but I like doing them. Usually I do them with a belt. This was just the most recent pause deadlift clip that I could find that had pretty good solid pauses. But I like pause deadlifts because you're making sure that your back is forced to be in a comfortable position, because you're not going to be able to pause a deadlift rep if it's in an uncomfortable position, and then you're able to focus on being explosive out of that pause with the good solid back position. Number 3 is going to be barbell RDL. Doesn't have the most carryover to deadlifts in and of itself, but I think it's the greatest for fatigue management because deadlifts are really, really taxing on the nervous system. So doing a variation that you're going to be lifting a lot less, but you're also still strengthening your posterior chain, your core, your back, your glutes, everything is going to be working towards getting your deadlift stronger. So I love barbell deadlifts. And then number 4 variation is going to be deficit deadlifts. Again, like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, I struggle off the ground, so this makes the deadlift obviously a lot harder because you're increasing the range of motion. So that off the ground portion where you're most likely to stress your lower back more is going to be targeted with lifting off of deficit. Obviously, again, I'm super pregnant in this video, so elevated deadlifts were my only option because I couldn't reach the ground, but I do like elevated deadlifts even when I'm not pregnant because you're working on that top portion of the deadlift. However, I will say that that's my strongest portion, so that's why I put it as number 5, but if you are struggling with lockout, elevated deadlifts are really good. Closing thoughts, if you're a powerlifter, I don't have to sell you on why it's important to train variations to the squat, the bench, and the deadlift, but if you're a bodybuilder or if you're just going to the gym and you don't see what the difference is or why you would even change how you're squatting, benching, or deadlifting, there's a few main reasons. The number 1 reason will be to train weak points. So I mentioned in my squats, a lot of the variations that I'm doing, like high bar squat, for example, are to work a weakness, which is my quads in relation to my glute strength. So I'm trying to target things that would be a limiting factor when I get to my top end strength. Another factor would be fatigue management. So you're lifting less load on your secondary or accessory movements than you are on your main movements. For example, the barbell RDL. Deadlifts are really, really taxing on the nervous system. So my daughter's having a really fun time crawling around. I'm gonna finish this really, really, really quick. But they're really taxing on the nervous system. So sometimes you might want to change how you're squatting, benching, or deadlifting because it's gonna help your recovery. You're gonna be able to recover better and you're gonna have less tax on the nervous system in barbell RDL. Okay, so number 1 was training weak points. Number 2 is fatigue management. And number 3, I would say also injury management. If you're training the same repetitive movements over and over and over again, that might be overuse. You might be damaging certain joints. You might be getting too much fatigue in certain areas. So for example, on a bench press, if you're doing too much compound bench movements, maybe you do a floor bench, it's a little less range of motion, you're getting a slightly different variation, adaptation, or if you're doing like a close grip bench versus a wide grip bench, or you're not doing so much pec engagement, you're doing more close grip engagement. Close grip tricep engagement. Anyways, let me know what your favorite secondary or accessory movements are when you're training squats, bench, and deadlift. Also, again, like I mentioned earlier in the video, sorry, the tripod's moving right now. But just let me know what you want to see in future videos. Let me know what your favorite exercises are. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you next week for another video.